Thanks for tuning in to the Prosperity for America channel. Today we're going to talk about panel interviews. And if you're even wondering what a panel interview is, a panel interview is where you go into a room to interview and there's like 4 or 5 people there that you're going to talk to all at once. You might be at a conference table, you might be in a room where we're all sitting around in a circle, etc. And it's a little bit more pressure, I'll give it to you, all day long. But there are things that you could do in a panel interview that could really help you stand out from the rest of those folks that are caught in a situation just like you. They can be very effective. They're usually used more in technical and management positions. And what you want to do, first of all, strategically, is make sure as you're answering questions that you're looking and giving eye contact to everybody in the room. In other words, talk to the room like I'm moving my head around and you're eyeing up. You keep trying to catch somebody's eye contact because you just still want to find a way to connect with each person in that room. And so from there, what you want to do is find out their different roles. Okay, like they'll probably introduce you. And you'll get to meet or get told the name of each person. But it's actually good to know what position each person is in. So as they're introducing you, and they might just say their first name, and if they do that, then ask them, so and what is your actual position with the organization? All right, and actually at that moment, you could start to take control of the room just a touch, but I don't mean it in a strong sense. But when they tell you, well, I'm the engineering manager, okay, you might say to them, as long as you know that you're not going to report to them. In other words, you wouldn't ask this question to the person you suspect that you'd report to. So if you're the HR manager position is what you're interviewing on, you would probably report to the director of operations or something like that. You wouldn't report to the engineering manager, for example. All right. So what I'm talking about here is people besides who you would directly report to. And you might ask them, so how would you and I collaborate with each other? Collaborate's a good word, but also gets them to, you could have right out of the gate some personal interaction with them in a small way where you're showing interest in them and preparing yourself, because one of the big questions that you might want to ask is, how could I help you most in your position if I were successful in my position? All right, it's a great question to ask. So in a weird way, what you're starting to do there is break the ice. All right, because what happens is panel interviews become very stiff. And when they do, they get to feel uncomfortable. So what you want to do is gain a little bit of familiarity with each person in the room, all right? And so don't be afraid to ask them questions, like I'm going to give you a couple right now. How would you and I collaborate with each other? Another question would be, from your perspective in your position, how could I help you the most? See, everybody in the room has their different needs. Right? They're not just usually in there just to get another opinion. There's usually a reason that they're in the room, all right? And if you could just talk about that for a minute or two, and then but you want to stop after about 2 or 3 questions for each person, all right? But you don't want to, and if you feel like it's awkward to even ask the 3rd question, stop there. So if you have to ask their title, right, then that would be question 1. And then question 2 might be, so how would you and I collaborate with each other, etc. Or how could I help you the most from this particular position that I'm interviewing for? Because here's the key thing I want you to remember. It's very important to make sure everybody in the room is happy with you as the possible choice. And the best way to do that is to take a shot at finding out what each person is looking for, because they might be looking for obviously the same position, and they might have all know what the job description is. But see, a great thing to find out in any interview is how you could help the most. How could you make a difference, all right? And so it begins with asking questions and not being timid about working with this team, all right? If you do the questions in a relaxed, comfortable way, then what it will show is that you're not intimidated by being with a bunch of people. Now, if you're in a management position, for example, that's actually a big deal. So it's an opportunity for you to showcase that. But then, as you sit down, they probably have questions that they've prepared. All right. A lot of times, the CEO, if they're in the room, won't ask a lot of questions. They want to see how you react to a lot of questions. And also, quite frankly, when you're the CEO and you're asking questions, if you like them, all the other people in the room will like them. So if you want to actually really see, as a CEO, if your team, how your team feels about a candidate, it's best for you to hold back your questions till last, or maybe just not even ask any questions at all. You might just summarize some things at the end. So with panel interviews, I want to emphasize so far what we talked about is asking, what their position is if they haven't told you in the introduction of that individual, and then ask how that you could help them most in your role as whatever you're interviewing for, and then you could stop right there. All right, but if you have the chance to ask how we would collaborate, either one of those questions is good. I have a slight preference for how could I help you the most from this position and in this role in helping your department, your duties become more successful. Because it never hurts to be a team player at all. And also it is always good to consider that each person in that room probably has their own personal interest in this situation. And if you've met their personal interest, then the sad thing about these panel interviews is they're usually not democratic in the sense of you could win. If there's 5 people in the room, you're not going to win the job by getting 3 people to like you and 2 that are not sure. You're really actually going to have to carry all 5 people 90% of the time. So what you want to do is establish that you can interact comfortably with each person, and hopefully that'll create a bond where sometimes you could interact during the process. Like, say for example, say they ask you a question for have you done this or that or the other, all right? If you have done that particular thing they're asking, then it's great, of course, to say, yes, I have, and I did it at XYZ Corporation, and this is how we did it. And say if you could find a way to involve some of the other people in the room, rather than whoever asked the question, by just saying, so I know, like for example, in this particular question, the customer asked me about the technical capabilities in a different use for a position. And that's where you might turn to engineering and say, so would I be handling that as well for your department? Because an engineering question could be handled by an engineer, but a lot of times they want somebody who's used to being around other people. So I know this could be a very broad topic, okay? The key is, if you react well, seem to get comfortable, you're going to impress them, all right? And if you get conversational a little bit with them, all right? At the end of a panel interview, I really suggest that you ask some questions, okay? But not questions like, how much would I make? Or do you have dental? All right, because those look like selfish questions, and I'm sure that before you get hired or may offer the position, you'll get to know that kind of information, and you could always call into HR and ask, as you're making your decision. What I would recommend that you ask questions is, well, whoever had this position before me, were they successful and what made them successful? What you want to do is, as you're wrapping up the interview, that would be a great question to ask, and you could almost go around the room and ask what made them successful, and then you follow it up with another question: is how could I, compared to the person who had the job last, how could I have a bigger impact? How could I help more? Right? Because everybody likes to upgrade when they change things. Everybody worries when somebody leaves, especially if they were like retired and they did a great job for 30 years. That's a wonderful situation, by the way, to get involved with, because you know that if you do a great job, you could be there for a long time. But also, if you uncover that the person who had the last position was there only for 6 months and the previous person was only there for 6 months, they obviously probably didn't work out that well. So if you could find out what they did well and how you could do better, that will go a long way towards them picking you. All right. So panel interviews, I actually think, can be very intimidating at first, but actually you could really work it so that you could come out with it almost being to your advantage if you handle it right. So I've hoped I've helped in some ways, and if you had any more questions, we have all of our team would be glad to help, and if feel free to just call and ask us, and we'll try to help you if you're preparing, whether we're involved or not in helping you find that particular position. We'd like to help. So have a great day. Thanks for listening, and we're just trying to help you in your journey to find a more prosperous career and a more prosperous job. Have a great day.